Welcome to the Uncut podcast. I'm Pastor Luke.
And I'm Pastor Cameron.
And welcome back to the Uncut podcast, where we have uncut, honest conversations about faith, life, and ministry. I almost forgot what we talked about here.
Right.
So I was in here the other day, and I realized something, Cameron, that maybe you didn't realize, or maybe our viewers have been noticing but haven't said anything about. But this plant that's in between the two of us is an actual plant. I thought it was fake.
Yes, no, it's real. It's a snake plant, right?
Yeah. Well, we haven't been watering it. It's slowly been dying. I watered it before today's episode.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I don't know that you can actually kill these things because we have several in our house. And if you ask my wife, she will tell you that our house is the place where plants go to die. It's hospice for plants. And we have a few snake plants that are just like, I'm not sure we've ever watered them. Ever. They're just still alive and going.
Okay, well, I was like, the other day, I was like, oh, this poor thing. Like, I wonder if it's just been slowly wilting the whole course of this podcast. And, like, our viewers, maybe a plant lover out there has just been slowly watching it.
Yeah, we should go back to the first episode and see if there's a difference in, like, the shape and the color of how it looks.
See if it looked healthier.
Yeah, it probably did. I mean, we are on what we're recording now. Is it episode 29?
Yeah, 28 or 29, something like that. We're getting close to 30 episodes.
Yeah. So that's over half a year.
Yeah.
Did we start in January? When did we start?
I think we started recording at the end of January or maybe mid-January. And I think we started releasing in early February.
Okay. So February would be a year for us?
Yeah. I think, yeah, for sure. By next February would 100% be a year.
Yeah. I'm proud of us.
Yeah, we should be. We've not quit.
We've not quit. We've not skipped a week.
Yeah.
It's not always been really easy.
To
get them recorded or to know what we're talking about. And obviously, I like some weeks and episodes are probably definitely better than others.
Sure,
but I think
that happens.
Every podcast has got to be like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, there's some podcasts where I follow them or subscribe to them and I really, really like the content, but it's so abnormally posted.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's just kind of like sporadic.
Yeah, it's like you can't count on when an episode is going to come out.
Yeah.
A lot of the bigger ones you can.
Yeah, the ones with really big budgets and famous people on them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because they have other people kind of arranging their schedules. But there's others that have like start and they're like, oh wow, okay, like these first few episodes are really good.
Yeah.
And then it's like they haven't posted since March.
Yeah. I've definitely run it. I've found like, ooh, a podcast about the topic I really want to learn about or know more things about. They've only got 3 episodes, and that was like 2 years ago. And they like stopped, and like their last episode is like, "I'll see you next week," and then 2 years go by.
2 years go by, yeah.
And not that like, that totally understand how that happens with just about like any hobby. But podcast is definitely like I don't know. I hope if you're listening, I hope this feels like a bit like a conversation.
Yeah,
you're kind of sitting in. A conversation with us,
Right. Well, and also there's still, and we were talking about this on Tuesday, there's still the dynamic of us trying to determine what this actually is.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's still a significant, at least, there's still a pretty serious dynamic, at least internally to me, where I'm really aware of this,
right? Like
the
fact that there's a microphone pointed right in our faces,
and I still don't feel like the podcast has got the best of me. Like it's not got the best of what's inside of me,
right? Like
because some of the conversations that we have in private without the cameras and the microphones, I feel like have been really helpful, really like good good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of one of the initial reasons that we wanted to do this was
Right.
like, man, we often have some, off the microphone conversations that we feel like would be valuable if we could just press an internal recording button.
Right.
So still trying to grab onto that dynamic of like how to podcast in a uncut way.
Yep.
Knowing that it's actually cut.
Yeah. I mean, very, very, it is cut in its own, like.
We've never cut out content in order to.
No, I don't think so.
No. I mean, a little bit of post editing.
Yeah. I think, like, for the most part, you're sitting through, like, a solid stream of consciousness. We're not even editing out and, breaks in our thoughts and things like that.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe been once or twice, like, maybe one of us needed to go to the bathroom or answer the door or something. Yeah. We had to stop. But
so my commitment is to try and do a better job of not guarding what I say and just continuing to open up a little bit and let the cards just kind of fall where they do in conversation. Right.
I find it's really hard. Like it's really hard to do that because like, the buzz pop psychology word is like imposter syndrome, right? But I'm always just like, I don't know. Do I actually know anything?
Right. Or do people care about the things that I know?
Yeah, that too.
So like, I was talking to someone about this actually just like 2 days ago. We were talking about what it takes to be an expert at things. Mm-hmm. And there's like the law of 10,000.
Yeah.
10,000 hours, or what the arena that I talk about that a lot in is in jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. A lot of people know that I do jiu-jitsu, and I tell my students all the time that if you want to get good at a particular technique, plan on 10,000 reps. Like there's no substitute to repetitions. And so we got to talking about like, okay, well, what are the areas in my life where there's like you've reached expert level at? Mm-hmm. And you could take it in a lot of different ways. And usually people are not experts at something unless have been extraordinarily dedicated or obsessed even.
Yeah.
When they're young. Mm-hmm. Or they're just older and the longevity of them doing something has just amassed an expert level.
Right.
Right. But so things like, say, what are the things that I've been doing the longest in life? Mm-hmm. The 3 things I've been doing the longest, well, I've been pastoring.
Yep.
Be going into my 19th year, into my 19th year right now, which seems really, really strange to say because I don't feel like I've been old enough. I'm not old enough to do anything for 19 years. But also being married. Mm-hmm. I just had my 19th wedding anniversary to my wife. And then the third is jiu-jitsu, which I've been doing for 18 years. So there is some imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Always, but there also is some areas where like, no, we've actually put in a lot of time and had a lot of experiences and have really, I think, decent perspective or had an opportunity to see so many different perspectives that we at least have an educated opinion on something.
Well, and, like, one of the things, like you mentioned pastoring, and I'm like, yeah, like, I've not been professionally pastoring for a long time. I think I've been doing more. I've been studying the Bible for a very long time. Yep. I've been reading about the Bible and theology for a very long time. Been preaching much longer than I've been a pastor. But then I was thinking about, I was like, the other piece. Like, there's certainly things that you can only grow in your skill set while being a pastor and overseeing a church. But then there's like things like that personal self-work, like working through your relationship with God, going through different seasons, doing, kind of working on yourself, helping other people and kind of being with them through difficult times, like all of that stuff. When you scaffold out what is contained inside of the skill set of a pastor, like, so you mentioned those three things. I'm like, well, Cameron's also really good at like incisively understanding what's like going on inside of someone's heart. Like, I don't know if everyone's told you that before, but that's something I think you're very good at. There's been several times where I've seen you either in conversation with someone or in conversation with me, and you're able to just like go whoop, and you just point right at what is the core of the issue, or you have a good way of kind of, you know, taking, you know, what's, put it like in an example, I guess, like, you know, if you ever see a kid who like falls and hits their knee and scrapes their knee and they start crying, you know, and they're like, "Mommy, kiss it," or whatever, make the boo-boo go better or whatever. Well, the kid's not actually physically hurt.
Right.
They're having like an emotional thing.
Emotional response, yeah.
And you have a really good way of when people, or when, you know, when someone comes to you and they're like, "I want to talk about this theological issue," or "I want to talk about this life issue I'm coming up against," or this thing, you're like, "You know what, that thing, the thing is probably not the thing. It's probably this thing." And you have a good way of getting to that. So, and that's indicative of doing your own personal work and things like that. So you know, I do think that there's even more scaffolding to that.
Right, you're right. Yeah, so it's not just like the work of pastoring. It's all of these multidisciplinary things that are involved there. You know, and so like even if you talk about, well, all right, let's say we work 40 hours a week. And yeah, that might be what we work, but I know from my experience, I know this is true in yours, that the thought process of ministry is almost nonstop.
Yeah.
Is very, very rarely am I not thinking about something having to do with ministry or church or pastoring or the people I'm serving or whatever. But if you were just to take the raw hours, 40 hours across 52 weeks in a year. In a year, you're talking about almost, don't ever do math in public, 20,080, or not 20,000, 2,080 hours a year. So after 5 years of pastoring, you're essentially have reached that magical Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours.
Right. Which some people have like challenged, but like it's still generally a good principle. Yeah. So 5 years. So that means I'm actually coming up on 5 years here for myself being in a full-time pastoral role. Yeah.
I mean, and I would say that like there's, you know, time in, I would say like shouldn't discount time training for pastoral ministry.
No, sure, yeah.
You know, as the same thing. And then there's always the caveats of like, well, there's been many weeks where I've worked 60 hours or 80 hours, right?
Sure.
Versus 40.
Heaven, I don't think there's been that many hours we've done 80 hour weeks we've done 80 hours.
Very rare in my ministry has there ever been a week where I've done something like that, but
yeah.
There has been. There, it's rare though. So, but anyway, I think we said all that to talk about like how we've been feeling about the podcast.
Yeah.
And I was on vacation a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And you had an experience podcasting that was different than this. The conversation back and forth.
Yeah. I sat down to start another podcast here at Conduit called Rooted. The podcast name on both YouTube and where you listen to podcasts is Rooted Lifechange. So if you're familiar with Conduit, you might have heard of Rooted before, but you've probably not encountered it on any of your socials or in a podcast world or anything like that. So,
so let's talk. So it's a monologue podcast.
Yep. It's just me, which is much different than this. It's a lot easier to have a conversation with somebody over a microphone than it is for me to just talk into a microphone. That was a unique experience. But yeah.
Did you manuscript that?
I have like all my like main primary thoughts and stuff kind of written out in the notes and stuff that I've been using when I was teaching the group and leading the group. And so I just had a copy of that in front of me on my phone to kind of glance down to kind of remind myself of what maybe the topic was. Maybe there was an illustration in there I used, but there were some of it was also just off the top of my head as I was talking about it.
I've tried to use teleprompter apps on like iPads and stuff like that to do videos and stuff like that. And as much as I want to make it work, because I feel like, well, if I can type out what I actually want to say, it'll be better. It's just so hard to do that.
But it's so hard to not seem like you're reading and following the next line.
Right.
You know, avoiding teleprompter voice is so hard.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you're going to do it with like an app, you get this weird like back and forth between like looking at the camera and looking at the teleprompter, unless you have like
like setting it up so like the iPad is right behind the camera, so you're looking at the whatever.
No, that's
but anyway, so it is a monologue podcast that is called Rooted Life Change, and this is coming out of a ministry that you started here at Conduit, and little bit of backstory or history to that particular ministry, and then I'll let Luke talk about it a little bit more. Is that we have a strong belief here at Conduit that I would say it's more the strong belief. That sounds even more clinical than I want it to be, but like we actually have this crazy perspective that the gospel of Jesus Christ changes people's lives, and not just their spiritual life or their eternal destiny, but every thread of the fabric of their being can be changed by the power of the gospel. And so when people are struggling with an emotional issue or a mental issue or a physical issue or a spiritual issue, or we do believe that the gospel has healing power in all of those situations. And that's not to give kind of like the pat spiritual answer of like, well, if you're addicted, all you need to do is be more spiritual.
right.
Or just believe in the gospel and you will be completely freed from that addiction. I do believe that the power of the gospel can lead to freedom from addiction for sure. But it's often a little bit more nuanced than that. But anyway, and so you coming on board here, recognizing that that dynamic that we have here at Conduit, also your role as associate pastor, but really focused on discipleship and moving people from one position in either pre-gospel or to living a life fully transformed by the presence of Jesus, is like, okay, we see these things. How do we begin? We see these things evident in people's lives. How do we begin to offer, from a gospel-centered perspective, a place where these people can find support and encouragement, community, and healing, and a process to grow in? There's lots of different programs out there.
Yep.
Like that.
Yeah.
Like some of the more like, I would say well-known ones are Celebrate Recovery, which comes from out of California, Saddleback Community Church. There's one that kind of had a little bit of life cycle here in Chautauqua County for a while, started by Tracy and Daryl Strawberry. Daryl Strawberry, as in the baseball player, and his wife, called Clean, Sober, and Saved. I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with it other than to know that it exists.
Yeah.
There's a few others.
Yeah. I think there's one that's called Life Transformation that I've interacted with, and that one's pretty good.
Yeah. And then there's obviously programs like AA, NA, stuff like that, Al-Anon. There's CODA, which is a really kind of interesting one.
I don't think I know CODA.
CODA is Codependence Anonymous.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I've seen some really good stuff actually come out of there because I think more people tend to be codependent than they do addicted.
Right. Well, or codependency is wrapped up
in their addiction. Yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so anyway, begin to utilize some of those materials, some of those already pre-existing things, and realized that, or not that we realized, but we felt like it was not hitting the mark that we kind of hoped it would.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like how, without talking bad about those programs,
sure,
about where we felt like the discontinuity was between what we wanted to be able to offer and what was being offered?
Yeah. Oh. Well, so like one of the things is like in the recovery landscape, what I've come to find is that 12 steps really dominate. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the fact that they've been very, very successful, right? And have helped a lot of people get sober, make significant life change and improvement in their life. And there's nothing that I found in the 12 steps that I thought was particularly, in the steps themselves, that I thought was particularly wrong or unhelpful or anything like that. It's all really good stuff. But a lot of times what a lot of programs try and do is they take the 12 steps and then they say, okay, well, where are the 12 steps in the Bible? And so it's kind of and the thing is, and we've talked about the Bible a number of times on the podcast, and our view on the Bible is that the Bible isn't really a manual of sorts. Mm-mm. It's primarily about revelation of God, of who God is, who we are, and our relationship together. And
what do you mean the Bible doesn't mean basic instructions before leaving Earth? Bible?
No, it doesn't, Cameron. Oh, okay. That's not what the Greek means. Okay. That is not what that means. And so it's not an instruction manual, and it wasn't written with written with the intention of putting the 12 steps in there, or this, something that kind of bugs me is, a lot of people who will write in like kind of the Christian self-help or the Christian counseling world is they'll take a secular counseling kind of scheme. One, for example, would be kind of like attachment theory. So if anyone's listening, you know what attachment theory is. It's got to do with like how secure you feel in the relationships that you make intimately. And they'll go and they'll try and show how Jesus has a secure relationship style.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think the gospel writers were at all trying to communicate how Jesus had a secure attachment style and he wasn't anxious or whatever.
Right.
Like that's overreading. We're putting something onto the Bible that isn't necessarily there. And so that all, like we were just talking about, like if there's one thing that I've been doing for a very long time, and that's been reading and studying the Bible. And so when I'm interacting with like resources like that, and they maybe have a verse and they're like, this verse shows this, or it backs this particular like step up. I was like, actually, I don't think that that's a good application of that Bible verse. What that is kind of like, the common word for that is like kind of proof texting, which is like what I mean by that is like the smash and grab.
You have a point that you want to make. So you go and find a Bible verse that you can kind of cajole into making your point.
Right.
We call it eisegesis.
Right.
Taking our meaning and placing it over top of the text rather than allowing meaning to come out of the text and inform the step.
Right. And so not all proof texting is absolutely terrible. Like sometimes you can actually honor, and the passage actually means what you're saying it means as you put it next to the thing that you're talking about. But that's not always the case. Like if you just do a Google search, or like say you just search your Bible and you look for keywords, right? just because you find a key word or an idea does not necessarily mean that like is being uplifted or held up, right? One of the like passages or one of the portions of the Bible that often gets used, that sometimes gets used, and anytime I see it get used, I'm a little nervous, and that's the book of Job, because a lot of people will pull a quote out of Job. Well, Job has like 3 or 4 different people like making dialogues. And the thing about Job is that not all the people who are saying things are necessarily meant to be agreed with. They're kind of putting forth their own logic, and the book of Job is kind of arguing with them. And so if you pull a quote out of Job and it's like one of the 3 friends and they're like making this long point, you're not necessarily guaranteed to say that the passage is even meaning for you to agree with that. They might be meaning for you to disagree with what that person's ultimately saying. So there was that. But then also kind of we were talking about like not wanting to just simply say, okay, just pray it away. Right? Like, oh, you've got like a serious addiction or a relationship problem, just like pray more about it. Because I've not met a Christian with an addiction who hasn't prayed about it. Right? And so we don't want to just be simplistic. Want to actually bring the helpful things from 12 steps and from other modes of thought like acceptance and commitment therapy and things like that, and say what is really wise here, what's really helpful about human nature, and then bring that alongside a more robust and holistic understanding of the Bible and its theology, and then have the two kind of come together and kind of work on that. So that was kind of my heart when I started writing stuff for Rooted.
Yeah, and we decided to name it Rooted.
Yeah, we decided to name it that, which you helped me. I was really wrestling with what to name it, and I can't remember any of the really bad names that I was trying to come up with. Unless you do. I don't.
I don't remember either. No,
they weren't. They were. I mean, that tells you how bad they were. Is that like, you know, the name we landed on was good enough that I forgot all the other potential names. But we were kind of. I was kind of reflecting and thinking through like how does the Bible kind of like match up with this? I was kind of wrestling with the theology and wanted to kind of not just resort to, you know, smattering a whole bunch of passages together, but I wanted there to be kind of a connection. Like a through line. And then that was when I discovered trees in the Bible. I listened to or watched, or I don't exactly remember how I discovered, but I somehow got into, I know the Bible Project, which is a website and
YouTube page, podcast and all that. Yeah, that
you and I both listen to. We use it in some of our teaching resources and things like that. And they had a 7-episode run on their podcast. It was a couple years back, but I somehow stumbled onto it, and they were talking about the theme of trees in the Bible, and I had never sat and really thought about how many trees are in the Bible and like their significance and some of the theological understanding that kind of comes out of that. And I was like, trees. I was all about trees. And you were just like,
what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anybody in the office, my wife, pretty much anybody who I could get to listen to me was just going like, Luke, you have gone off your rocker. You're like, I'm like, trees, man. Trees are
it's
everywhere.
All about trees. Yeah. But no, that's kind of what led to it. It's like, all right, well, the theme of trees, and there's lots of conversation going on about like why would trees be an apt illustration or visualization for this type of program, but it's kind of like its own podcast series there too. But just then this like sense of rootedness in God's word.
Yep. A sense of kind of
groundedness, yeah, a rootedness and connection. Because there's like, you kind of picture like picture in your mind when you look up the picture, like go do a Google image search for tree with roots, and you get this kind of cross section of tree, right? And it's got this, usually trees have a pretty significant taproot.
Yep.
Right? The main root structure that goes deep into the ground and pulls a lot of nutrients, and right. And then you have all of these, what I'll call capillary roots that go out wide. And it kind of, for me, visualizes or encapsulates like the modality of the whole program as like the taproot is the gospel. Right. It is like, it goes deep into the soil. It's firmly connected to the trunk. Right. But then you have and that's where we are the experts in, right?
Right.
It's the gospel. That's what we have.
Yep.
Right. Similar to what Peter and John said to the crippled beggar at the beautiful
silver
gate.
And gold.
Yes, silver and gold I do not have, but that which I do have, I give to you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Get up and walk. They had the gospel. That's what they gave him.
Yep.
So the gospel is kind of like the taproot of the root structures, but then all of these little capillary roots are all these, some of them clinically based, some of them socially based, but corollary, parallel ways in which we can offer support, help, resources, encouragement, therapies. So like you mentioned, acceptance commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, maybe some attachment therapy in there. And like, we're not therapists.
Nope.
We're not trying to be.
Yep.
But to borrow concepts from them, the 12 steps.
Yep.
To borrow concepts from them to create a fully rooted structure.
Yep.
Where someone can, grow, produce fruit in their lives.
Yep.
And be kind of set free from, the bondage that they're in.
Yep. It calls to my mind literally what we were talking about last night. We had our class on the Psalms here at Conduit, and we kind of finished the night off by looking at Psalm 1. And the image there is like, blessed is the man who meditates on the word of the Lord, who is delighting in it, who's not walking the way of sinners, sitting in the seat of scoffers, right? And he is like a tree, firmly planted by a stream of living water.
Yes.
He's bearing fruit in season. Everything he does prospers.
Yep.
Not so the wicked.
Right.
They are like chaff.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we get this, you get this picture of the firmly planted tree, rooted and thriving. And then,
Want a Bible?
Yeah, there's a Bible under here. And then you've got chaff, which like I calls to my mind like leaves or broken off bark. Like it is just the absolute opposite of what that picture of the blessed man is. And if anyone has dealt with an addiction or generational sin or patterns of behavior or hurt that they can't get past, like you want to know what it feels like to be chaff blown around by everything, like that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Right. But in recovery, there's a sense of stability that you gain.
Yeah.
And you can feel like rooted.
Yes.
In place.
Right.
Bearing fruit in season. Right. Like for me, that just encapsulates like, where I hope people move from and to, and in their connectedness to God and all of that.
Yeah. So created the program, and it looks like what most people would consider to be a curriculum.
Yeah.
That's to be run in a group setting. And supplementary resources to that group curriculum is this podcast.
Yes. Yep.
So, or the Rooted Life Change podcast that you started, which, so if you're a part of Conduit or you're not a part of Conduit and you're interested in maybe participating in Rooted, it's not just for people who are drug addicted.
Yep.
Alcohol addicted.
Right.
No, it's for people who maybe are dealing with hurts, hang-ups, and habits, or who's the person that could benefit from it?
Yeah. So like the way I talk about it is, and see if I can remember how I've phrased everything. You know what? I'm going to pull it up just so I don't mess it up. But what we're trying to kind of do is like, and it might seem kind of strange to kind of think about like, what's kind of going on inside of our, like, why would I also want to listen to a podcast that's somebody who's addicted to, say, alcohol or pornography? I don't have those problems.
Right.
Those
are real problems.
Those are real problems. My problem, my shopping problem, or my the amount of time I spend on my phone, or those are not problems.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is that like there's probably actually a lot more in common than you think. One of the things that people like,
because we're talking about the roots.
The roots.
Right. So those are typically the things that are manifesting on the surface, our addictions, like things addicted to alcohol or drugs or my phone or shopping or gambling or porn or whatever it is. Like most of us think, oh, I've just got a porn problem. Oh, I've just got an alcohol problem. Well, no, like those things are like, if you watch the old classic Looney Tunes and, you know, Elmer Fudd gets hit on the head with something, and then this big bump pops out.
Yep.
Right? And he takes that bump because he doesn't want anyone to see it, and he pushes it back in.
Yep.
Right? And then what do we see happen? Then it goes boink off the other side, right? So that bump coming out the other side of the head is the addiction, or is the hang up, or whatever.
Yep.
But it's not, it's the symptom of getting knocked in the head.
Right.
So these things they're indicative of internal problems, and we've used these things, or we've resorted to these other things to help soothe, numb, the internal things that we feel, that bad thing we want to get rid of. Like, well, why wouldn't we want to like numb down the bad things that are happening? Like Brene Brown, one of the things that she says about stuff like that is, I think, really, really powerful, is that we do not possess the ability to selectively numb.
Yeah.
So if we choose to numb
the bad
things, we're also choosing to numb the good things, joy, happiness, fulfillment. So we can't selectively, as human beings, we can't selectively numb the bad things.
Yeah.
We just numb everything. Right. And it's like when you have a tooth pulled and they stick a needle in your gums, it's not like just that spot. It's now the whole side of your face feels like it's melting off for the rest of the day, you know?
Yeah. Right. And you're drooling everywhere.
So what's your, how do you communicate who Rooted is appropriate for?
I say breaking cycles, finding healing, and making life change.
Yeah.
Right.
So that can be laid over top all kinds of things in our lives.
Whole tons of things. And
patterns of intrusive thoughts. Even.
Yep. Yeah.
You know.
And the thing is like, if you hang around anybody who's like successfully gone through like an AA program, they'll tell you, I showed up thinking I had a drinking problem. Found out that I have like a living problem.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, the amount of alcohol they consumed and all of that like is certainly a problem. But there was a greater problem underneath. And the thing that, sure, you might not share the same particular weakness or problem that somebody else who you think has it worse off, or I'm not that bad, or I don't need that kind of help. The thing is actually what's going underneath it for both of you is probably a lot more similar than you would think.
Yeah. So, right. So there's the actual program of the curriculum.
Yep.
And groups forming here at Conduit soon.
Yep.
We've already done a group, right?
Yes.
But it goes in cycles, and so new groups be forming soon for that program, and then this kind of a supplementary source or podcast. The
podcast is kind of going to act as like a place for me to kind of just talk through what I've been thinking through and writing out, and act as kind of a bit of a reach, but also just to try and gather a community, kind of allow people a way to kind of stick their toe in the water a little bit. Because sometimes it's, it's scary to come to a meeting and show up, because like you're going to show up and there's a whole bunch of people and they're going to talk about their feelings and emotions and what's going on in their life. And that's,
or I've been living my life as if there's no problems whatsoever. So if I show up to this meeting,
right. Or people are going to go, oh, they're here. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Right.
Didn't know they were having problems.
Yes. And so, this provides a little bit of a entryway, allows people to kind of have a little bit more access to it. It's also just also a tool for me personally. I want it to be a conversation. I want to be thinking through and hope people are able to interact with the content, and we can kind of flesh more of it out as more people interact with it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Great. So what we'll do is, in the show notes for this episode, we will link the Rooted Life Change podcast as well.
Yeah.
And go check it out, subscribe.
Yep. If you're listening to this podcast episode, we'll have 2 episodes coming out this week.
Yes. Yeah.
So be looking for those. I think I'm going to put them out on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week.
Great.
And while you're listening.
And there's also, you have socials for it, right?
Yeah, I do have there's an Instagram account, and it'll also be on YouTube. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can still watch it there. So
great.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be I'm excited for it simply because I think it's really helpful content. I think it and some of it is born out of my own like working through and trying to understand my own heart. Understanding like what's my own like proclivities and sin nature and things like that. So these first couple episodes we'll be talking about kind of like this principle I'm saying of like, what does it mean to live in the light? What does it mean to kind of step out of denial, right? If you're used to like 12-step language, you would say like the first step is admitting, right? Admitting that we are powerless to solve our problems. And this is, I'm talking about that idea of like, how do we get stuck in denial and all of that?
Yeah. And how does the light, bringing things out into the light, begin to give us freedom?
Yes.
A la 1 John, and the Gospel of John,
right.
Great. All right. Well, make sure you're looking forward to or looking for that, both that podcast and that YouTube channel. If you guys are interested in that, I think it's super valuable resource. I'm so encouraged and proud of you.
Oh, thanks
for doing all that. And it's not been a short project, or
no.
We've expended a lot of or you've expended a lot of time and effort there. So really grateful and proud of you for that, and eager to see how it works to change people's lives in the next few years here at Conduit and beyond. So make sure you're looking for it. And as always, please like this episode for us.
Yeah.
Subscribe if you're not. Share it. Review it. Send us questions to our text line, 716-201-0507. And we will try and get them answered when we have mailbag episodes.
Yep. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks.